North Carolina's governor who decided that he didn't like that the legislature was starting to make some rules that he didn't like about education. So what he declared is he declared a state of emergency for education. And it's not really a state of emergency, but he had to come out and call it a state of emergency just to play some game. And it's funny. I read an article, and we discussed on last week's show about Neil Gorsuch and saying how, politicians use emergencies to take people's rights away, and that's not a thing we should be doing. And the article actually referenced what Gorsuch said and what this guy's doing, because I am sure if this governor had the ability to issue an emergency executive order, he would do it. He would say, I'm going to do a state of emergency for education because I believe my opponents on the other side are doing things that I don't like. So let's watch the video. We could talk about this. I kid you not, probably for an hour. All the word salad this guy says, everything he brings up. I might stop the video a couple times just to really hone in on a couple things that he said and how they twist. And we all know politicians do this, but how they twist things, and then if you listen to one thing and wait a couple seconds and then they say something that contradicts, it's horrible. So here we go.
Hi, everybody. It's time to declare a state of emergency for public education in North Carolina. There's no executive order like with a hurricane or the pandemic, but it's no less important. It's clear that the Republican legislature is aiming to choke the life out of public education. I'm declaring this state of emergency.
Again, the cojones of this guy, a state of emergency. There's no executive order, but a state of emergency. This is a scary thing for me too. I don't think a lot of people get is if politicians start doing this, right? It starts off with this, like, hey, it's a state of emergency. I really can't do nothing, but it's a state of emergency, and you give credibility to these type of things. Slowly, it turns into they will have the ability to actually make this a state of emergency. This governor should be shamed. He should be laughed at. He should be called out and said, "How dare you take something like a state of emergency?" And we'll look at the definition. I have that in a slide later. How dare you take something that's actually used when there is an emergency, and just because you're not getting your way with education, because the people voted and the people actually want what's going on in the legislature to happen, that you have to sit there and get up and look all professional and invoke this state of it's mind-blowing, and something we have to stop, because like I said, if we keep allowing them to do this, they're just going to take the next little step until this thing is something that they're going to have a power to do that they never had the power to do before. So
If you care about public schools in North Carolina, it's time to take immediate action and tell them to stop the damage that will set back our schools for a generation. Here's what's happening in the next few weeks. Their private school voucher scheme will pour your tax money into private schools that are unaccountable to the public and can decide which students they want to keep out.
So again, is he kind of right? Your tax dollars will be poured into private schools. Okay. But if you're a parent of a student, isn't that your tax dollars? Right? It just blows my mind. It's like, hey, your tax dollars are going to go pay for this family's kid to get a better education. And I'm sure that family who would otherwise say, hey, listen, this is a failing school. I can send my kid to a better school. And because the state takes a bunch of my money, now they're giving some back that I can use to send my kid to school and get a better education, which helps the state out. But I think the real issue here is, I think politicians like public schools because they can manipulate what you're learning. And I think it happens on both sides, right? Because Democrats will say, look at Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. And Republicans will say, look what's happening in these other schools with all this woke stuff and this, you know, what's it, DEI and, critical race theory in schools. So I think both parties try doing that. And I think a lot of parents are sick of it, and they're just like, listen, let me make the decision. I shouldn't have to feel trapped because I moved to a town where the school system doesn't line up with my values, or I just want my kids to learn math, English, science, and be left alone with everything else.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So the dollars follow the student. So if each student is getting whatever $10,000 per student, and you have all the kids in the public school system, and then all of a sudden parents are making their own decisions. Hey, I want my kid in the private school system. Then guess what? Those funds are going to move with the students. So this public schools are going to get less. So he's calling it out like this is some like nefarious scheme, but these are parents making decisions that, hey, I want my kids to go to these school systems because I like these school systems better than what's currently being offered. And he's trying to twist it into making it look like it's some like nefarious thing going on, which that's not the case.
It's always they're the evil parents who want their kids to get a better education. Ooh, those evil parents. So all right, let's listen a little bit more.
They want to expand private school vouchers so that anyone, even a millionaire,
Ooh, those million. This is what I love. Like, even a millionaire, even a person that pays more taxes than you, they're gonna get help. Well, they pay taxes too. Why wouldn't they? But again, this is that class warfare they want to use. Like, oh, millionaires are getting help. Yes, they pay taxes. Why shouldn't they get the same benefit? Aren't we about equality? Oh, nope, we're not about equality in this situation.
can get taxpayer money for their children's private academy tuition. When kids leave public schools for private school, the public schools lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And while they hand out private school vouchers to millionaires, they also want to give them large tax breaks too. This drops an atomic bomb on public education by shrinking the state's budget by almost 20%. Public school superintendents are telling me they'll likely have to cut schools to the bone, eliminate early college, AP, and gifted courses, art, music, sports.
So here we go. Doesn't this happen every time? I hate when they do this. I so hate it. Every time there's budget cuts, what do? We're gonna cut sports. And when I listen to this, you listen to this, and what's he doing? He's trying to appeal to people like, hey, we're gonna cut all these things that you people like. So the answer is to cut the things that help people achieve. Gifted classes, AP classes, higher learning classes. So the only thing that we can teach in schools, the only thing we can teach if we don't have more money is general education level classes. Is that what you're telling me? Is that a reality? Because that's a reality. I'd pull my kid out so quick too.
Yeah, and then the other kind of thing that he hasn't talked about that's a huge influence in the public school system is the teachers union. And we see how much money goes to that and how much we saw in Massachusetts in question 1 last year, how much money the teachers union pours into political decisions. So in like the ballot question 1, for example, and you don't hear him talking about making cuts there. It seemed like that's I would probably cut there before I cut anything else that he's listing, but you don't see him talking about that.
Well, it's funny. I was doing some research, and it was kind of close to this. I didn't put it into it, but it talked about what the national debt was in like the 1960s. I think it was like 200 something billion dollars, right? And then fast forward to now, we're like what 35, 50 trillion, who knows? And people are like, what did we get for all that debt? And here's something I've said to people for a long time is like my mother would show me her yearbook, and they had all these programs, all these societies, all these things they could do in school, and school has gotten less and less and less like extracurricular things that kids can do, and it's getting more and more expensive. So what's happened? How did school get more expensive and give you less? I mean, I guess it's kind of like everything now. I'm gonna say this now. You used to buy your bag of cookies, and now you buy your bag of cookies, and it has this plastic thing in there where each cookie goes in, and you could probably fit like 3 cookies in that one cookie thing, and the bag's still the same size, so you think you're getting the same amount of cookies, but there's like 12 cookies in the bag for the same price. That's what we're doing. We're kidding people.
Yeah, I think of it like the runaway HOA, so the homeowners association fee. So it's like, it's like you start off paying, $100 a month. Maybe that's just going towards like some shared utilities or whatnot.
Yep.
The next month, all of a sudden You get, there's a new cleaner that's involved that's going to clean up things. You're like, okay, I'll pay an extra $50 for that. The next month after that, you get a new person coming in, and then but before you know it, after a couple of years, your HOA has gone from $100 to $1,000, and you have all these services and things that you're not really benefiting from, but you're paying for, and that's kind of what has gone on with the school system. And you look at most of these towns' budgets, for example.
Yep.
Like in my town, the population has increased by about 10% over the last 10 years, but the budget has gone up by about 70%, and a lot of that has come from the school system.
So wait, yeah, we gotta wait because it gets better. Because you kind of jumping the gun. So let's check it out.
If the legislature keeps draining funds to pay for private schools and those massive tax breaks, we have more than 5,000 teacher vacancies in kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms, leaving tens of thousands of students without a qualified educator. Our students deserve good teachers. That's why instead of tax breaks for rich folks in private schools.
So really quick, think about what he just said. He's like, we're 5,000 teachers short. And I think parents would see this too. Like, hey, listen, some of these schools don't have enough teachers. And there's an actual option. It's private schools that you could go to. So I think this is a good thing. Like parents say, hey, listen, our school doesn't have the appropriate amount of teachers for my child to get a good education. So why shouldn't I be able to get it? And what his argument would be is like, well, the school would lose money. Well, the school has a job to do. The school has to educate. The school has to prepare. The school has to do better. The option shouldn't be, well, just wait for us while your kid suffers. No wonder parents support this overwhelmingly in North Carolina.
Private school vouchers, I proposed a pay raise of 18% over the next 2 years because our teachers deserve better pay and more respect.
So again, I knew you were getting a little bit ahead. He wants to give them an 18% pay raise right off the bat. I would love an 18% pay raise over the next 2 years. I'd love it. When most people love an 18% pay raise, the legislature there wants to give, I think, 9%, 4.5% a year. I think that's what they're saying. And that's too little. That's disrespectful. And then what he's going to do is, again, they always change it. They always, for people that don't know how things work, they always come out with something to confuse you. So he's going to tell you that, hey, listen, some of our highest tenured people are only going to get $250 over the next 2 years. But what he doesn't tell you, and those are top step teachers. So teachers have like a step program where, you have a bottom step, you get paid this. And then, as you work up, you get more and more money. And then there comes a point where you top out. You can't make any more money. But again, there's a little misinformation here. Let's call it that. Because what happens is every time there's a teacher contract renewal, that top step number changes and it gets higher. And then what they do is they not only does it get higher, they raise it every year too. So if you were a teacher that 10 years ago and you looked and you said, hey, listen, at my top step, I'm only going to make, let's say, $50,000. 10 years later, top step is $72,000. So that teacher's been making pay raises, but what he's going to do is he's going to like, oh, some people are going to make $250. Well, they make the most money. There is just a across the board raise for every teacher. So there's nothing like, hey, are you an effective teacher? Are you a good teacher? Are you a better teacher? Like, there's no performance review to justify this. It's just like, well, you made it this long. You stuck it out with these kids, so here's some money. And I'm sure that $250 within another contract or two will be thousands of dollars. So these are the little tricks they play because people don't know how it works. So there's a little bit more to go, so we're just going to get through this quick.
But the legislature wants to give them neither one. In fact, the Senate has given veteran teachers a $250 raise spread over 2 years.
Not veteran.
$250. That's a slap in the face, and it'll make the teacher shortage worse. Tax giveaways to the wealthy also harm our youngest learners. Families and businesses across the state have called for strong investments in early childhood education. But so far, the legislature is turning its back on children, parents, and the businesses that want to hire those parents by shortchanging pre-K, Smart Start, and quality child care. Our strong state economy is built on strong schools at every level. What doesn't work is taking away funding and using partisan politics to fool parents who care deeply about their children's future.
Okay, remember, this guy just said partisan politics.
Not satisfied just to starve public education, the Republicans in the legislature also want to bring their political culture wars into the classrooms. If they get their way, our State Board of Education will be replaced by political hacks who can dictate what is taught and not taught in our public schools.
Is he
North
projecting?
Carolina schools need
Yes.
rigorous science, reading, and math classes.
I would agree with this. I would agree with they need rigorous science, reading, and math. And he's sitting here talking about they want to fight the culture war in school. I think there's a reason why parents and the legislatures are doing this. I think what's happening is there is a culture war going on in school, and the parents don't like it. And they voted this legislator and a lot of these people in saying, you need to fix this. And like I said, there's mass support. We'll see it later. There is mass support in North Carolina for what the legislature is doing. And this guy is like, they're gonna get their way and we won't have our way. Well, that's
Yeah,
what
he-
happened.
He's
Go ahead.
talking about all the things happening in the school system today that people are fed up with, and that's why they're moving them to the private
Yes.
school systems. And
Yes.
he's saying, "Oh, if private school systems exist, all these things are going to happen." Well, it's like all these things are happening.
Yes. So, all right, just a little bit left on this, whatever, because then he gets into the crux, I think.
Not more politicians policing our children's curriculum with book bans, elimination of science courses, and more.
There it is. There it is. The elimination of science courses. I don't know which science courses he's talking about, and book bans. And so he just said not to make it political. He said the culture wars, but now he's talking about book bans. Well, what book bans is he talking about? And why do you think parents are rallying behind these legislatures? Again, this guy is a losing argument.
Put together, these ideas spell disaster that requires emergency action.
I also was able to go on to this website Reason. I found this article, and the really cool thing about it is for people that had listened to or watched our last show, it actually tied into what we talked about last week when Justice Gorsuch warned of officials addicted to emergency decrees. And this article speaks about it. And I just want to read a little bit to you out there because it just parallels what we said, something we said in the beginning too about politicians who want to take the power and just rule everybody and not have any consequences, right? Is it an emergency when you're losing an argument? North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper thinks it is. He declared a state of emergency for public education because state lawmakers proposed what he calls extreme legislation regarding education choice, funding, and curriculum. While Cooper claims no extraordinary powers, his performative declaration underlines warnings by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, published just days earlier, that government officials have become entirely too accustomed to issuing emergency decrees to bypass normal debate and suppress dissent, and that civil liberties have suffered as a result. And I can't disagree with that statement. Why else would this guy sit here and come out and say, "Hey, listen, I'm ordering this state of emergency. I have no authority to do it, but I'm issuing it," because I think what happens is he wants to set a precedent. You know, executive orders, for most people, I don't know if they know this, executive orders weren't used that much, probably like 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, gridlock was happening in Congress, and now that's how our government runs, through executive orders, and that's not how it's supposed to run. So I have up on the screen for the people watching on YouTube and for the people listening at home, I'll read it. This is what a state of emergency is supposed to happen for. When disasters strike, whether natural or man-made, state and local governments and emergency managers need quick access to resources that allow them to manage a crisis and return things to normal. The declaration of a state of emergency helps elected leaders achieve this mission. All right, a state of emergency helps enable government officials to take extra measures to protect the public, trigger anti-price gouging laws, and seek state or federal funding aid for disaster response if warranted. Some of the things that it's supposed to be used for is to be cleared during a situation or imminent threat of widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property resulting from natural or man-made cause. This has nothing to do with any of this. And what this politician, this governor, and his people thought, hey, listen, let's call it a state of emergency because that'll rile people up. And then maybe what happens if people accept that we call this a state of emergency and we get some support on our side, we'll then use it as a state of emergency to rule by dictate and then overthrow the rule of the legislatures and the people that want these laws to be passed.
Yeah, like you said, the field goal posts keep moving. So when you have a hurricane, for example, come through, most people are going to be like, okay, state of emergency. I'm not going to, bark too much about that. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we have a health pandemic, whatever. We're going to issue a state of emergency for that. Most people are going to say, okay, we kind of agree with that. Then you go, okay, now we're going to say, oh, there's a climate crisis. We're going to call a state of emergency for that. And then all of a sudden you're going to, oh, there's an education crisis. We're going to call a state of emergency for that. And again, it's like now we're getting to the point where there's no imminent loss of life. And then the field goal posts keep moving and keep moving. So what's going to be, one, there's no imminent loss of life anywhere in here.
Yes.
It's like what's the next emergency going to be? But he is right to call an emergency. I think he's just identifying the wrong victim here. The victim is not the education system. The victim is the government losing control of the school system and losing control of tax dollars and power over all that.
You're way ahead of us today.
Yeah, I think that's the real victim of all this.
So I'll read a little more of this article because this article states it like way better than I could, and it was very well written. So, is it an emergency when opponents disagree? It's time to declare a state of emergency for public education in North Carolina. Cooper, a Democrat, announced May 22nd. There is no executive order like with a hurricane or the pandemic, but it's no less important. We heard him say that. It's clear that the Republican legislator is aiming to choke the life out of public education. Specifically, Cooper objected to the legislature's plan to expand a private school voucher scheme, by which he means the state's opportunity scholarships, currently limited to low-income students. A bill passed by the House and pending in the Senate would expand criteria for participation. So there was a bill to help low-income students get better access to education, and they want to expand that. That seems pretty reasonable. So the Choose Your School, Choose Your Future Act eliminates income eligibility limits for the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Instead, vouchers would be awarded based on a sliding scale with lower income families getting the most money. So remember he told you those dastardly millionaires would get this money. Well, they're not going to get as much. They're still going to have to pay more. So, don't clutch your pearls too much, guy. That doesn't sound like much like of an emergency, but neither do Cooper's disagreements with lawmakers over tax cuts and teacher pay. And while his dispute with Republicans over curriculum decisions on what students learn is yet another serious example of the country's political fracture, it's also one that could be resolved by giving families vouchers to pay for schools that suit their needs and preferences. That is, one element of the governor's so-called emergency would actually be fixed by what seems to be his main emergency concern. Like you and I said, there's that political fracture. Let's not make this political. And the culture wars in the school. And a lot of parents, we don't want to have to deal with this. So just give us our money back so we can get our kids just to be educated, because we don't need them to be part of your culture war, part of your indoctrination. The last part of this is good. Then we can talk a little more. So he says, it's worth noting that Cooper declared a state of emergency, not just because he's losing an argument with lawmakers, but also because he's losing an argument with the people of North Carolina. School choice is popular among the public that elected the governor to office. That's it.
I think the millionaire class is becoming like a pariah in society today. Think about it. I mean, let's say you were a millionaire in Massachusetts and then you had the millionaire's tax passed on you. So you moved to North Carolina. Now all of a sudden the governor's coming after you and saying that you're ruining the school system and that we don't want you here. Now all of a sudden you're gonna have to find a new state to move to. And it's like, you'd think that, people, and like most millionaires I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but I think it's like 9 out of 10 millionaires are self-made. They didn't inherit their money, so that means they started a business. You're either a lot of them have just work regular jobs, but they've saved up their entire lives, and
Yep.
they reach retirement age, and they've between the equity that they've built in their house and like their savings and 401k and everything like that, they're technically a millionaire. But yeah, it's like, it's like they're an unwanted class. And it's just, if I was a state, I would be like, I want you guys to move to our state. And I think that's what you're seeing in this shift is there are a lot of states saying, hey, we want to treat people that do the right things versus other states saying that are essentially penalizing you if you're doing the right things.
So this guy's fighting a losing battle too, because I put up on the screen this there was a poll by Morning Consult, and they polled the parents in North Carolina, and the pollsters reported that 61% of all adults and 73% of school parents support school vouchers. We don't really agree that much on a lot of things, so that's pretty good. 69% of adults and 80% of school parents favor education savings accounts, and 68% of all adults and 78% of school parents support charter schools. People want it. I think people on all sides are just done. And the best thing about this right now, if you read the next, I'll read the next part, is Governor Roy Cooper, I guess, had three daughters, and they all graduated from St. Mary's, which is a private school.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
And his wife would serve as a commencement speaker at the school's ceremony in 2017. So here's the thing: we have great schools. We need great public schools. Oh, all my kids, they went to private school.
If they didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all.
All right, so I think like I said, this is something to watch. You're gonna see this. This is going on. These conversations are happening everywhere. In Massachusetts, and I'm pretty happy about this. You see people pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them into private schools. And I even talked to more people that if they had money to do it, they would do it. And I bet you anything that if we had a school voucher program in here where you could get your money to send your kid to a private school, like public schools would suffer. And I don't want to see that happen. Like I legit don't want to see that happen. I know a lot of good teachers in the public school systems. I think what happens is a lot of the administration, and not just even the administration, probably politicians that set policies for these schools stink, make these schools bad. If they allow these schools to actually teach and actually set high standards, you know what would happen? Is people wouldn't have to look for other schools. They wouldn't be looking for other schools. But what's happening is we're lowering the bar and we're teaching stuff that parents don't care about. They want their kid to be educated. Kids can't count change. They can't read cursive. There's so much they can't do these days. But there's all this other stuff they want to teach your kids. So I think a lot of parents are just getting sick of it. And hopefully this is what turns it. Hopefully what happens is again, as we said earlier, hopefully politicians and these people that make these decisions smarten up and realize, hey, listen, we had it good for a while. We kind of have to get back to the basics and start doing the right thing. And like I said, this kind of ties into what we talked about last week with Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, of how politicians will use emergencies to gain power. And it's something we have to stop. It's something as citizens, we have to sit there and say, no, like it has to be legit, and you have to have the consent of the people, and you can't take our liberties and you can't take what is ours away from us just because, you have this feeling or this belief that something isn't going the way you want it to go. Like you said earlier, it could be, hey, listen, there's a climate emergency, so none of you people can do this. No. Like that's something that everyone should have to get on board with, not just ruling by fiat.